Hello, this is Vulturefire, and this video is going over the various new features and changes in Breach Wanderers patch 7040, which is Trials of the Breach Part 1. So, as usual with my patch breakdown videos, I'm going to be going over all of the major new features and changes, but I am not going to be talking about every single thing that changed. If you want to see full details, the patch notes will be linked in my in the description of this video. There should also be timestamps for various parts if you just want to skip to specific things and you want to hear me talk about those. Also, I do plan to record additional videos to accompany this, which will not be out at the same time this video is, that will talk about things like going over the new character in more detail, talking about some of the new cards, talking about some of the new items. So if you're interested in those, that will all be available in the future. Once those are up, those will be linked in the description of this video. Leave a comment if I haven't made one of them and you want to see them. All right, so let's actually get into it. So first of all, we have a new character, Nayema. So Nayema is easily the most complex character that is in the game so far. She has 3 stances, and each stance has a unique passive that is in effect while you are in that stance. And then also while you're in that stance, there are 3 special astral cards that you can create. Her cards and passives revolve around using mana boost, wits, burn, and spells. She has a lot of flexibility in what she can do. She is great at drawing cards, gaining mana, both of which are obviously great things. She's good at increasing the damage of your spells. She has all sorts of incredibly powerful and useful things that she can do. And I've had a lot of fun learning how to use the character, and I plan to have up a video that will, like I said, this is a very complex character, and I do plan to put together a guide explaining how the character works, if you're curious. Here are a few examples of some of her cards, just real quick to show you. The one I want to specifically highlight is Solar Amplification, which is a 3-cost skill that is you choose one spell from your hand that hasn't had its effects doubled, and then this turn you double its effects. So the most basic thing you can do with it is, if you use it on, say, a Singularity, instead of Singularity doing 60 damage, it will do 120 damage. And that can be further modified by any spell bonuses. So if you are Mighty, that will be 120 times 1.25. But that's the most basic, is doubling damage. You can also double the cards drawn by a Quip Shot, double the amount of mana you get back from a Mana Bolt. All sorts of incredibly powerful things you can do with this. So it's a lot of fun to play around with and fun to find new uses for. Another new feature, moving on, is the Idol of Emptiness. So if you've used the Shrine, you're familiar with how idols work. If you haven't used the Shrine, it is unlocked after you have won a Depth 3 run for the first time. The Idol of Emptiness will show up randomly alongside any other idols. Of course, if you go through the process of unlocking the ability to buy extra altars, you can buy up to 6 altars in the Shrine, at which point you will, of course, be able to see all 6 idols all of the time. While the Idol of Emptiness is invoked, enemies will need more Frost, Shock, and Arcane in order to freeze, apply Shocked, or Arcane Detonate. And in fights that are directly augmented by the Idol of Emptiness, enemies will start with Purity, and Idol of Emptiness will play its cards, which include things like Dispelling the Player, applying Frost, applying Frostbite, applying Fatigue, stealing mana, all sorts of nasty things. So if you are already using the Shrine, this is another added challenge that you can look forward to playing with. On top of that, there is we have another new feature. This one is just here's 3 of the cards, because of course with a new idol we have 6 new reward cards, 2 commons, 2 rares, and 2 epics, depending on which type of fight the idol is augmenting. And so here, real quick, are some of these are half of the Idol of Emptiness cards, if you want to look at those real quick. But I am going to go ahead and move on to another new feature, which is character skins. So each character now has at least 1 alternate skin. A lot of characters have 2. As you can see here in this screenshot, we are looking at one of Rowden's alternate skins, but he has 2. The alternate skins have a little bit of extra lore with them, and they can be purchased with gems if playing on mobile, or gold if you're playing on PC. And if you're curious what gems are, that is a new currency and it is mobile only. So because Steam is a one-time purchase still, there are no microtransactions on Steam because you just pay up front. But on mobile, you will instead have to earn gems either through play or through buying them. They are earned fairly slowly, but that's kind of deliberate so that the idea here is if you want to speed up things and get all of the characters immediately, you can spend money. But also, if you have any of the resource boosters, that will also improve the rate at which you get gems. For an idea, the Nayema costs 1,000 gems, and I was able to get that much within like a weekend of playing, doing like 3 or 4 runs, I think. I have the first of the unlock packs on mobile. I don't play on mobile very often, and then I just was playing normal 3 idols activated runs, and I was able to get a couple hundred gems per run. So it shouldn't take you that long if you want to get them through playing, but also obviously if you want to support the developer, that's important so that the game can keep getting made, because it's important that one day is able to afford to eat food, because people don't do great if they can't afford like food and a house and all of that. Anyway, so right now gems are used to purchase skins, and the characters Paladin, Shrew, and Nayema. If you've already started playing prior to this patch coming out, you will still be able to purchase Paladin and Shrew using gold. Spending gems is only going to be for new accounts, so that when they didn't want players who were already playing to feel like they had been cheated because they just hadn't bought the characters quite yet, and then the patch comes out and now they have a whole new currency that they have to get. If you have already purchased the packs that contain the permanent upgrade packs, you will get gems based on equal to whatever the pack now gives. So for example, the first pack gives 500 gems. So if you log in and you had already purchased that pack, you will immediately get those 500 gems on updating. Another new feature, achievements. So Breach Wanderers now has achievements. There are currently 73. 72 of them can be achieved, and then the 73rd is for winning a Depth 4 run, and Depth 4 is not in the game yet. The achievements are a mix of straightforward goals, like reaching level 10 with the character, and more complicated ones, like winning a Depth 3 run without using mana cards. I have a few videos recorded for several of the more difficult achievements, or at least more complicated ones. So if you want to see what that looks like, those videos will be up at some point, and I will have a playlist of all my achievement-related runs. So those are a fun challenge to look forward to trying to complete. We also now have cross-platform saves, which is something people have been asking for a while. So if you are playing Breach Wanderers on more than one device, on more than one platform, so for example, you are playing it on mobile and on Steam, you can now use Breach Wanderers cloud save system. You use the cloud save button in the menu, and instead of that saving to Google Play or Steam Cloud, when you press that button, you will then get to enter an email address and a password, and that will be your account for the Breach Wanderers cloud. And then you use the cloud load button on any other device or the same device to retrieve that save. So you can use that in order to move a save between devices, or iOS previously didn't have access to cloud saving at all. And there were several people who had problems where they lost their device, or for whatever reason they had to uninstall the game from their device, and then when they reinstalled it, they had no way to get their save back. And so now you have cloud save. You do have to manually use this. It is not automatic. So save early, save often. Backing up your save is important. So that is it for brand new features. But let's move on to the new generic cards. So there are 24 new generic cards. As usual, you find these by opening packs. So if you already have all of the cards, if you previously had all of the cards, then you can buy 8 new packs of cards, and you'll then have all of the 24 of the new generic cards. They do a variety of things. We have things like Dark Ritual, which is a card that supports a sacrifice and ally theme, which got a bit of support. Flood of Insight, which is an incredibly powerful card draw card. And Pocket Sand, which is an amazing way to apply weak. If you watch basically any of my videos where I'm not doing a quick play run, you'll see me getting a lot of mileage out of Pocket Sand. There was also a card rebalancing. As always with a Breach Wanderers patch, there were a lot of cards that changed. In particular, summoning cards were buffed. So for example, Spirit Swarm, it used to be 2 mana and you got one allied angry spirit, and if you couldn't summon the spirit, then you got powerful 1, and so did your allies. Now it's 3 mana, but you get 2 spirits, and specifically you try and summon 1, and then if you can't, you give yourself and all allies powerful 1, and then you try and summon again, and if it fails that time, you again would get powerful 1. So you could get 2 spirits, you could get 1 spirit and powerful 1, or you could get powerful 2, which overall makes that quite a bit better. And the upgrade is powerful 2, so you can get up to powerful 4 when playing Spirit Swarm Plus, which is amazing. And then you have Charge Text, which is now... So a variety of the other cards, so this isn't a summoning card, but so several other cards were buffed, nerfed, or changed in order to add more variety to viable decks. You had especially when dealing with idle runs, there were a lot of cards that just weren't really worth considering. Charge Text was one of those. It previously applied Arcane and you removed a shock to do more Arcane. Now instead, it applies Arcane and then additional Arcane for every rank of shocked on the target. So if you're playing a deck that is not really trying to do normal damage at all, that is purely a status-based deck, you can use this to deal a really massive amount of Arcane and just obliterate things, which is a lot of fun. And then Curse of Decrepitude, which used to be a card that was part of the Frail, Vulnerable, Weak strategy that has been changed. And now it is a more direct curse support. You give curse 2 to any enemy, and you draw 3 if any enemy, not just the one you targeted, has 10 or more ranks of curse. So that helps make the curse archetype a lot stronger. On top of that, we have a total of 60 new items, 12 weapons, 10 outfits, 15 accessories, 23 trinkets. And these items will show up when you reach 100 item energy during a run alongside any of the other items that already existed. So this is just more things that you can see during a run, more variants. You'll be less likely to see the same handful of items at every run, especially trinkets. You're less likely to be guaranteed to see the same trinkets. And do a variety of things. A lot of items were also rebalanced. 26 of the existing items have changed. And some of them were direct buffs. Some of them were just changed to make the items more interesting. There were a lot of armors, for example, that were just basically some variation on max health plus 2, max shield plus 2. And it's like, yay, how exciting. And a lot of those have now been changed to do more different things that it makes them more interesting. So all in all, items are now a lot more interesting. There are a lot of items now with trade-offs where they have positives and negatives. There were already some of those, but there's even more of them, which means that choosing the right item for your build is now even more important than it was before. And then on top of that, we have start getting into the mechanics. For the patch, we have one new mechanic for the patch, which is creation choices, which is only one new mechanic, but it does a lot. So the way it works is that some cards will now give you a choice of cards to create. And then when upgraded, these cards will create upgraded cards. So for example, Haunted Memories now says, create a temporary cursed memory, troubling memory, or soothing memory, which when you play it in game will look like this. So you can see it says choose a card, and then we have 3 options, and we just pick and drag the one that we want into our hand, and it will do whatever it says it does. So this means that we have several cards now that have this sort of choose one templating, and as you can imagine, that makes them very flexible and very useful. In this case, we have a card that can either apply Curse if we just want to set up long-term damage. You can give Weak and Arcane Leak if we are wanting to get either of those, and it can just gain us mana. So it is a card that can be very flexible. It is effectively a card that can be mana or defense or offense, depending on what we need, which is incredibly useful. And that's just one of several of these cards. And this was obviously an existing card, Haunted Memory, and several other existing cards also have this template. And Nayema, in particular, a lot of Nayema's cards use this, the Astral cards and a couple for other cards that are unique to her. So that's the only new mechanic, but there are a lot of mechanics that changed. So let's get into those, starting with Cleanse. This is a fairly simple change. Cleanse was nerfed. It is now down to reducing debuff ranks by 20% instead of 25%. There's still a minimum of 1, but it does mean that in order to remove 2 ranks with 1 Cleanse, that will only happen if you have at least 8 of the debuffs. So you have 8 Curse and you Cleanse, you'll go from 8 to 6, but if you had 7, you would still only lose 1 and go to 6. So that makes it worse at managing high stacks of buffs. This does apply to enemy cleanse as well, which can be useful. There are some enemies, especially in Crystal Valley, that will cleanse themselves. But overall, cleanse was already valuable, and this kind of makes it even more important to get multi-cleanse. Sanctuary, Cauterize, these cards are now even more valuable than they were before. And upgrading Cleansing Shield, for example, is now more important because it's that much harder to deal with Curse using only things that cleanse once. Corrupt. So Corrupt still increases the number of ranks of all So Corrupt previously was increase the rank of all debuffs by 1 on whatever you hit, on whatever gets corrupted. Now it still increases the rank the number of ranks of all non-damaging debuffs by 1. So weak, frail, vulnerable, crystallized, shocked, all of those will go up by 1. But instead of increasing the number of ranks of damaging debuffs, corrupt will trigger all of them. So if an enemy has 2 burn and 2 weak and you corrupt them, they will gain a weak and they will take 6 damage and lose 1 rank of burn. If they had burn and frostbite, then they would, in addition to taking the 6 from the burn, they would take 3 from the frostbite and get 3 frost from the frostbite. If they had a bunch of curse, they would take a bunch of damage from the curse. So corrupt can do a lot to enemies that have a lot of debuffs on them. And it also will trigger Doom, which will reduce its rank by 1, and Doom Change, which I will talk about in a moment, but I have these mechanics in alphabetical order, so it will be a slide or two before we get back to Doom. So, critical. If an attack has a critical chance above 100% to deal a critical hit, the extra critical chance becomes bonus critical damage instead. So if you have plus 20% chance base from an item, and you get the critical buff, and then you attack an enemy with ambush, so critical buff plus ambush is 100%, plus 20% base, you're at 120% crit chance. You will keep that 100% chance to deal a crit, and the extra 20% becomes bonus critical damage. So if you don't have any other modifiers to crit damage, you are now dealing a 170% damage crit, and you're guaranteed to do that. So that it makes, this doesn't come up that often, but it does make items that increase your crit chance a little bit more valuable to Mirley in particular, who will often have a 100% critical chance by just combining critical plus hidden. Another change, Dispel. So instead of reducing ranks of buffs by 1, which is what it used to do, it will reduce ranks by 10% with a minimum of 1. This doesn't come up that often, and it mostly will come up when the player gets hit by an arcane detonation, because it will only apply when there are at least 15 ranks of a buff. So it usually happens like you will lose some amount of growth or sturdy instead of just losing 1. It's very rare, even with idols active, it's fairly rare for monsters to end up with more than like 15 or more powerful or anything. So this is mostly going to affect the player. Another change, Doom. So I alluded to earlier, Doom has changed. So previously, all Doom did was that when you ran out of Doom, you took 50 damage. Now, whenever a player or monster loses rank of Doom, they get a rank of Curse. And if they lose multiple ranks of Doom at the same time from being dispelled while they had more than 15 Doom, they will gain a rank of Curse for each rank of Doom lost. And this includes any source. If Doom is lost from being corrupted or dispelled. So remember I was saying earlier that when you were corrupted, you would lose a rank of Doom. That means you'll get a rank of Curse. And that curse will show up before corrupting deals damage from curse. So if you have no curse, but you have Doom, and you get corrupted, you will lose Doom, you'll get a curse, and you'll take 2 damage from having a rank of curse. And then Doom will still deal that 50 damage after the last rank is removed. The net result of this is that Doom is way more useful as a win condition for slower decks. Previously, you only had that single hit for 50 damage, which meant that against idols, that wasn't always enough to kill things even in Area 1. But now, with that curse added in, that massively increases the amount of damage you can get out of Doom. This also means that Doom will slowly carve through Purity, because every turn you lose rank of Doom, you get a rank of Curse, and if you had Purity, that Curse will remove that rank of Purity to block it. And on monsters that will do the same thing, which can make Doom can be helpful against, for example, the Idol of Emptiness, the new idol that adds a bunch of Purity to monsters. Moving on to other changes, Empower. This is kind of the most drastic change imaginable, which is that Empower is now gone. So Empower was was previously a keyword that meant increase the ranks of all buffs by 1, and this was this proved to be a problem. It was either not very good if you didn't have Plated or Fortress or Powerful or Evasion, and it was incredibly good if you did. Strenuous Vigor in particular was notorious for just allowing Silan to do absurd nonsense shenanigans where he would have infinite Purity and infinite Plated and infinite Fortress. So now it doesn't do that as much. Empower is still going to give you the Powerful and the Plated if you have those things, but it will give you more Sturdy if you have Sturdy and more Growth if you have Growth, but it won't help you like sustain Runes or sustain Doom or any of those other things. So it is now much more limited. And Strenuous Vigor is now a pretty different effect. You heal based on how many unique buffs you have, and then you get Powerful and Plated, and those are the only 2 buffs you get from Strenuous Vigor now. It's Powerful and Plated. So that's worth knowing, is that that keyword is now gone. This only affects these two cards. These were the only two cards that had it. There's also a weather card from Soothing Skies that now just gives powerful 2 to everybody. It was previously give powerful 1 to everybody and empower them once. But that wasn't a card that you could put in your deck, so it doesn't come up that often. Another change, Envenom. So Envenom has changed pretty substantially. Prior to this patch, Envenom would apply 2 poison every time for every hit. So if you played a card that like Slash that does damage 3 times, it would apply a total of 6 poison, 2 per hit. Now, things with Envenom deal half as much damage, but whenever they deal damage, they also apply that much poison. So if you had a card that would deal 10 damage, but you're envenomed, you're going to deal 5 damage and apply 5 poison. This is going to ultimately lead to you doing more damage overall, because poison will, because you'll do with poison, you'll do the 5 damage from poison, and then that would go to half, and you do 2 additional damage, so you get a total of 12 damage, 13 if you count the final turn, because it go from 5 to 2 to 1. So instead of doing 10 damage, you've done effectively 13, but 8 of that is delayed. Unless you have somebody trigger poison prematurely. Envenom halves damage after all other damage modifiers are applied. So you can think of it as kind of having the base damage. So, or no, because it's after even powerful. So like if you have Envenom and you have 2 ranks of powerful, that will still only be plus 1 damage from the powerful, despite because it's halved. There's no cheating this. It is whatever you were going to do is cut in half, but you deal equal amounts damage and poison. So that it tends to be very useful for characters that can take advantage of it. Rue, for example, because especially if you have a Rue's level 10 passive where you can get critical hits on the poison, because what can end up happening is you get a critical hit, which will then deal a bunch of damage and a bunch of poison, and you get the critical damage multiplier on the poison on the damage done by the crit, and thus on the poison applied by the crit. And then the poison itself can critical thanks to Rue's level 10, which would mean you're getting to double dip on that critical damage, which can be incredibly powerful. This change, there's now moving on to Frail. The Frail change is a lot more minor. Multi-hit lifesteal attacks now only consume 1 rank of Frail for the entire attack instead of 1 rank per hit. Previously, Frail was pretty bad into Idol of Hunger, because you apply Frail 2 to an enemy and they attack you for like 2x3 damage, and there's all of your Frail gone because that uses up 3 ranks of Frail. Now that would only use up 1 for the entire attack of 3 hits. So that makes that a little bit better. And then another change, Frenzy. So last patch, Frenzy changed so that you would lose 1 rank of fatigue on entering a Frenzy turn. Now you lose none. Your fatigue will be unchanged going into Frenzy turns because infinite chaining was still too easy on the last patch. Cards that had their costs increased by fatigue on the previous turn will still be reset, but the cost will then be re-increased again after you take your new turn, if you draw them on your new turn. But it does mean that you don't have to worry about them compounding too hard. This obviously does make it harder to chain together a ton of Frenzy turns, but that's on purpose. Taking extra turns is incredibly powerful, and keeping that balance between extra turns being useful but not overpowered is a difficult line to walk, and hopefully this will help fix that. Hidden. So this is part of the Mirley rework that I'm going to talk about a bit later, but Hidden is now possible. You can now have multiple ranks of Hidden at the same time. Previously, Hidden was a binary thing. Either you were Hidden or you weren't. Now, cards that gain Hidden, the same as every other buff, will give you multiple ranks of Hidden. Will give you 1 or more ranks of Hidden. And instead of leaving Hidden when you play a damaging card, you just lose a rank of Hidden. So if you have Hidden 2, then you can play 2 cards before you will be out of Hidden. In addition to this, you will lose a rank of Hidden at the start of each turn, which means that you can't just set up Hidden at the start of combat and then never play any damaging cards and stay Hidden forever. You will have to actively maintain Hidden if you want to continue having that evade chance. So that makes Hidden more interesting in a lot of ways. Another thing is that this means, because it's no longer a binary thing, you can eat an arcane detonation, and not immediately be dumped out of Hidden, which was a thing that happened previously and was especially annoying if you didn't have access to Mirley's level 7 passive yet. But like I said, Mirley Rework, I will talk more about it later after we get on with mechanic changes. So another mechanic change, Stasis. So in addition to one card leaving Stasis at the end of turn, which is how it used to work, now also a card will leave Stasis when the deck is shuffled. So that doesn't include at the start of combat, so you still don't get a Stasis card on turn 1. But if you can forcibly reshuffle your deck, for example, because you have something that says draw a spell and your only spell is in your discard pile, that will also then put a Stasis card on top of your draw pile. And that means you also immediately draw, like after the shuffling, but before you would start drawing cards. So if you had no cards left in your draw pile and you played a card to draw 3, the discard pile would be shuffled into your draw pile, and then the first card you draw would be a card that had been in Stasis if you had any to get. If you haven't seen Stasis, this is a mechanic that applies mostly to idle cards, the idle reward cards that you get from fighting idle augmented fights when you have invoked them in the shrine, which again is a thing you unlock after you have beaten Depth 3 for the first time. Nayema also has a single character card that can put cards into Stasis. But mostly, if you have not yet started doing shrine runs, that's why you haven't seen Stasis yet. Another change, status runes. Before this patch, status runes were a flat 2 status per hit. So you hit 3 times, you apply 6 status. Now it is status equal to 15% of the damage dealt with a minimum of 1. So that means that if you need to do at least 10 damage in order to get 2 status. And then I don't remember the number, it's 17 or 18 damage in order to get to 3 status. This ends up meaning status runes are a bit more useful to decks that are playing, they're doing a lot more damage, but it also means status runes are a whole lot worse with multi-hit decks that aren't able to stack powerful. It is very, very, in general, I find this to be a nerf to runes in the decks that were using them previously, so be aware of that. Shock rune, though, it is worth noting because of how that works. Once an enemy is shocked, you'll deal a bunch more damage to them, which means you'll apply a bunch more, which means that because you've done more damage, the rune will apply more shock to them, which then can mean that shock rune can help sustain itself. Of course, the other 2 runes don't really help you with that, but it is worth noting that is a thing that makes shock rune in particular a fan of this change. Another change, treasures. So previously, treasures would draw you 1 to 3 cards at random when you played them. Now they give you a choice of 2 cards to create, and they are 2 from the pool of 6 treasure cards. There are 5 common treasure cards and 1 epic. The chance of seeing the epic is 1%, and I do not have a screenshot of the epic handy because I was too lazy to go grab one, but I can show you the others. So you can see here we have the new wording: treasures. Yeah, create and choose 1 treasure among 2, and these are your 5 common treasures, and these are what you will see most of the time when you play a treasure. You have Ancient Arms, which is powerful 1 and mighty 2. You have Brilliant Amulet, which is apply 16 of a random status to any enemy. You have Gold Pieces, which is draw 2. So that's effectively what the old treasure average roll was. And then Ornamental Armor, which is 4 shield, tough 2, and sturdy 4. And Valuable Gems, which is gain 5 mana. So each of these effects is worth basically 5 mana as the game calculates things, which means that treasures are still a good deal. You'll notice that like the cards created are free. So once you've played the treasure, the thing you get out of it is free. But you are playing 2 cards which could be relevant if you or an enemy has Bleed or Arcane Leak. So the other thing to note here is that the cards that are created by the treasure are tools, which can be relevant if you're playing Inna. They can be retained between turns with Inna's level 10 passive. And they can be discarded to the new Improvised Strike, which I'll talk about in a moment. But overall, this means that ending up with a lot of treasures in your hand is more useful. Previously, if you had a lot of treasures, what could end up happening was that you were just playing treasures to draw into treasures and never actually getting anywhere. Basically just wasting mana for nothing. And also, because it was random 1 to 3 cards drawn, 1 out of 3 times you played a treasure, you just spent a mana to draw 1 card, and that was basically, and if that was a treasure that had been shuffled into your deck, that was functionally identical to having spent the mana on absolutely nothing, just incrementing your fatigue counter for no gain. So now every time you play a treasure, you will get something out of it, and usually at least one of these will be something you're looking for. Obviously, all of these are things that almost every deck wants. Maybe your deck doesn't particularly care about status, but 16 status is enough that it will likely apply status effects even if you don't have any buffs for that. And so yeah, just overall, treasures are a lot of fun now. I've had a lot of fun with the new treasures, and I have some videos with those, which you can see when they come out. Other mechanic changes. White Flame. So this is the last of the mechanic changes. White Flame has been nerfed slightly. It previously was 5% status, 5% extra status applied and damage dealt per rank. Now it is only 4%. So you have White Flame 10, that is 40% extra damage instead of 50%. And also, when you lose White Flame for being attacked, or an enemy loses damage for being attacked, it is now 4 damage instead of 5. So just everything with White Flame that was a 5 is now a 4. If you haven't seen White Flame, this is another thing that is tied to the shrine. This is specifically the White Flame Idol. Surprise is the one that has cards that add White Flame both to enemies and to you. So that is something to be aware of if you are playing into that idol, is that number has now changed. So that's it for mechanic changes. Let's talk about character changes. So first of all, Mirley has been reworked. This is a pretty major rework. The level 1 passive, the plus 50% critical damage, is now her level 10 passive. Her level 1 passive is now that you create 1 smoke bomb on your first turn, and you draw 1 smoke bomb from your deck every turn. So one of the things that was previously an issue with Mirley was you would have these turns where you'd have these fights where you just never found your hidden cards were all at the bottom of your deck, and so you would just get demolished on the first 2 turns because you could not enter hidden. And it led to this awful dynamic with Mirley where you just had to run all of the hidden cards. You couldn't afford not to have a lot of hidden cards in your deck, because if you couldn't find them on turn 1, you were in trouble. And it didn't matter if you had upgraded them to make more smoke bombs or whatever, because it doesn't matter how good the card is if it's not in your hand. So in order to fix that, you are now guaranteed to be able to enter hidden on turn 1. And if you don't play smoke bombs, you will draw 1 at the start of the turn before you draw your hand, and you can draw it from your deck or your discard pile, which is very convenient. Her level 1 passive, like I said, okay, so level 1 passive is level 10. Her level 4 passive is in its level 4 passive, only terrible. So it's your weak, vulnerable, and frail debuffs are 10% more effective. I think this particular passive is not very good, but that's really an opinion that's for somewhere else, not really here. Level 7 passive is unchanged. But also, almost all of her cards have changed. So the majority of Mirley cards have been changed. The rarity has changed on a number of them, so that, for example, Blade Dance is now... No, Blade Dance didn't change rarity. Fail Strike changed rarity. Bold Move changed rarity. I think a couple others did too. But Covert Strike, for example, used to be deal 3 damage to the first enemy and enter hidden. Now you deal 3 damage to the first enemy, you gain hidden 2, and you create 1 smoke bomb in your discard pile on critical hit. And Vanish used to gain you shield and create a smoke bomb. Now it's a 1-mana skill. If your last card scored a critical hit, you gain evasion 1, and you cleanse yourself 1 time, and then you create a smoke bomb. So it gives Mirley a unique cleanse card that only she has. And that's also non-temporary evasion, which is nifty. Killer Instinct is now gain critical 1 and lethal 2. You choose any enemy, and you draw 1 strike for every debuff type it has, which is applying a variety of debuffs is a Mirley sub-theme now that appears on a number of her cards. So if you play Mirley, definitely make sure you read over all the cards. Also, as you can see, these all have shiny new art that they did not have in the previous version. So yeah, if you are a Mirley player, there is a lot of new things to look at this patch, and you will probably need to change all of your decks. So have fun with that. Silan's change is a lot more minor. As a side effect of other changes, Silan's level 4 passive has been nerfed slightly. Silan no longer receives a tool when drawing his initial hand of cards. It's kind of a result of, like I said, it's a result of other things, where the initial putting the deck together at the start of combat no longer counts as shuffling the deck, so that will no longer give you trigger level 4 passive and give you a tool, which is a little unfortunate, but Silan's still pretty good, so that's not a huge downside. Another change is that damage and status prediction now appears. So if you can see in the screenshot, I'm aiming at Maw, and over Maw you can see that it shows you how much damage this is going to do. And if you are playing an AoE card, for example, Aether Storm or Fragmented Blast, it will show you the damage on each enemy, which can be very useful if enemies have a variety of different buffs and you don't want to have to just guess at how much damage your AoE card will do. AoE meaning area of effect, for those of you who are unaware. There are some cards that don't have predictions due to various reasons, but the majority of cards in the game, when you aim them, you'll get a prediction. It'll show up and be really nice and pretty and just makes playing the game a lot easier. It's one of those things that, like, I've had it for the entire beta and I had forgotten it was new because you get used to it and it feels like it's always been there and it should have always been there. Other changes, new enemy intent icons. So there are 2 new enemy intent icons. One of them is that when an enemy is planning to apply a buff to all enemies, it will use the area of effect buff icon, which is 3 green up arrows. So previously, if an enemy was just applying a buff to everyone, there was no way to tell the difference between that and just a buff to only itself. And now that AoE icon will hopefully let you know which is which. And also, when an enemy is planning to apply a debuff to the player and all of your allies, you will see the area of effect debuff icon, which is 3 red down arrows. So basically, it is just the buff icon, but there's more of them, or the debuff icon, but there's more of them. I don't actually have screenshots of that because I didn't get around to that. I believe my last change that I have actually noted out here is new card art. So even more cards that were previously using generic asset art now have custom art that is unique to Breach Wanderers. So you can see here we have art from 3 different cards. Guess what they are? Or, look it up in the game. One of the 2. Leave that as an exercise for the viewer. But that is going to be it for this patch breakdown. As I said, if you want to see full details, you will want to go see the patch notes, which are in the description. And also in the description, like I said, there will be links to any guides that I have made when I have those done. I promise I will make at least one guide this patch. I cannot promise you when it will happen or what it will be for, but look forward to those. If you have any questions, leave a comment. I do check my YouTube comments, and I will answer any questions that you have. Or you can join the Discord and ask the dev directly. Either way. So that's it for now. I will see you hopefully in one of my other videos where I will do a run probably, because that's most of my videos. Like, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff, I guess. Toodles.